Thank you again for joining the Oracle Primavera Cloud Risk Management Overview session for the DRM Talks. My name is Thomas Cutting. I'm a Senior Project Controls Consultant with DR McNally and Associates. I'll be the presenter today. Before we get started, because we are an Oracle provider, this is the safe harbor provided by Oracle to let you know that anything we say is speculative at best. It's not a commitment to deliver any material, code, or functionality. Any of the opinions here that I represent are my own, based on my use of the system. And Oracle is not responsible for any of that. So I'll give you a second to read through that before we go ahead and jump in. The agenda today, pretty straightforward. We're going to be looking at the risk overview. We're going to talk about risk registry, response actions, risk analysis, and risk iteration analysis. So Oracle Primavera Cloud, or OPC, is a comprehensive cloud-based solution that enables companies to manage their projects, programs, and portfolios through portfolio management, in which they prioritize project requests, aligning them with strategic goals, and selecting the right set of projects to deliver. It also does schedule management for planning, tracking, and reporting on project progress. Task management, which is a topic we may cover in our next session, which enables lean construction planning and schedule management. Resource management for overseeing labor, equipment, and material needs and usage. Cost management for budgeting, cash flow tracking, and funding. And risk management, which is the topic for today. So I am going to go into the actual application. Let's see, I have to exit out of this one. And this is Oracle Primavera Cloud. And I am in the soccer complex remodel project. So in OPC, risks can begin as a proposed risk with a workflow approval process to determine if it should be included in the risk management process. And then you go through the whole risk identification, and we'll talk about the risk probability and impact assessment. We'll look at the costs associated with each of those, and also tie them to specific activities, and then carry that all the way through. So I'm going to switch to the dashboard view here. So click on the menu bar, and I'm going to go into the dashboards for this project. I'm going to actually go to the risk management dashboard. And here I can see the risk exposure, total contingency based on risk, the risk exposure based on the different categories of risk. I can look at the actual threat and opportunity risks and the impact that they have on both pre-response and post-response. There's a nice graph here that shows the impact and probability for each risk. And then some more graphs showing the pre and post comparison of the data there. So fairly robust risk management dashboards. And now we'll go into see how this risk information is actually captured. So I'm going to go into the risk registry, again, going to the main menu and coming down to risk register. As I said, risk can begin as a proposed risk. So let's select the action proposed risk. And it's going to pop up a window here from our workflow that enables us to define the risk as an opportunity or a threat. and give some general information about it. These forms are actually customizable so that you can collect the information that you want to determine if a risk should be accepted as a risk. And then I would submit that. That would go through the approval process and either be approved or rejected or placed on hold for further review later on. Once that risk has been approved, or if I just want to add a risk here in the registry, I would go through and start defining the risks on that. So for example, if I select, let's see, the marsh conditions near main field may be wetlands, and I can define that in more detail. The type of threat that is, the type of risk could be a threat, could be an opportunity. We'll come back and talk about the weather type after this. And then the status for it, this is in proposed status. I can move it into open, monitored, different sections there. But the idea here is I'm going through and defining this risk. So the risk details, cause, description, effects, the probability of this happening. So you can see the red, yellow, green represents the low, medium, and high impact probability and impact that this risk might have. The schedule impact. So this can be done in number of days, minimum number of days impact, maximum number of days impact. And I'm also defining here, both in the probability and in the impact, the pre-response. This is what it is currently. And the post-response, this is what it would be if, in fact, we took the mitigation steps. So if I go over to the cost management, let's see, for that, I can show that as well. Now, for my post response here, I might say that instead of it being 200,000 to 300,000, if I'm able to mitigate this, maybe it goes down to 100 to 200,000, right? Based on what I do in my responses. Save that. I can also define here the impacted activities. So these are the activities that are impacted by this risk. We'll show you in a minute how I can tie in not just the impact to these risks, but also the impact at the risk level at the activity level that this risk can have. Okay. Also define codes, connect files to it, related items, add a location to it. And then once you've got it kind of defined, you're also going to want to go through and put in the response actions. So these are the actions to take in order to mitigate the risk here. And then start and finish dates for those. You can see it also tracks those that are late and flags those for me. And then I've tagged these specific responses to the site preparation activity. So that's the definition of this, right? Let's talk about the risk registry itself. So I'm looking at the risk registry. Currently, I'm showing a view called qualitative risk analysis. This risk is showing the pre-response probability, impact to schedule and cost, and then the pre-response score for that. I can change that view and use my post analysis. So here's an example of qualitative risk analysis where I've actually captured the cost associated with this, right? So that's the quantitative cost associated with each one of these risks. You'll also notice that this is the post exposure or post response exposure for this. These are the values after we've mitigated it. So I can create these custom views that allow me to show exactly what I want to do that and display the columns and coloring that I want for the risk register. In addition, I've got the ability to show the chart. So this is the risk impact chart. I can see the overall project has a score of 186. I can see the total number of risks, the exposure, the ones that are being monitored, and then I can see the number of risks in threat versus opportunity. I can show the risk count in each category, and then also the probability and impact diagram for that. So these risk matrices are also customizable. So I've got the ability to pick a specific risk matrix for each project. Okay. In addition, if I go back to the table view, you'll notice that these activities also have a column here for discussions. So if I click on that discussion, it'll pop up the discussion section where it will show the comments that people have made. I can also like that comment or add another comment to that comment and post that. This allows me to communicate information about this and get people's feedback on this risk as well. Now, if I go back to the response section and let me close this out here, and I click on the specific activity this is tied to, it'll open up the activities window, and then I can show you here, I've got the apply uncertainty view open. So if I look at this, what this does for me on activity, let's see, it was B1090, site preparation. So here I've defined that activity. I've gone through and done all the predecessor stuff. I've scheduled the project. It came up with a start and finish date for that activity, right? Well, I can also take a look at this from the perspective of the Monte Carlo simulation, right? So if I'm looking at this, the planned duration is 5 days. The most likely, according to my analysis here, is 10 days. So I'm already going to be late on this one. Minimum duration is 4 days, and my maximum duration is 20 days. One of the features of the risk analysis is that it goes through up to 5,000 iterations, and we'll look at this in a little bit, and does scenarios based on that, right? So it says it might take this activity, and one iteration might take the minimum duration. So this activity actually finishes a day before it was projected to finish. Or the next time through, it might take the maximum duration, and so it'll push it out 20 days instead of the 5 days. So that Monte Carlo simulation goes through that process, those iterations, picking and choosing different data to do the simulation with in order to project the impact of that risk in to the project. Okay. Let's go back into the risk registry. I want to show you one more thing there, risk register, and that is the weather-related risk. So if I come down here to the weather-related winter weather, not such a big deal in Southern California or in Arizona, but certainly other parts of the country have that issue. So here I've defined this winter weather issue, and I have defined it with general, but here in the weather is where I can pick periods of time and set the minimum, most likely, and maximum days that this incident might happen. So from 1/3 to 2/28, there's a minimum of 5 days that we might get winter weather. It's most likely 15, and then the maximum would be 18. So again, it takes that same thing into account during the Monte Carlo simulations to say, the first pass through, I might take this risk and apply the 5-day minimum to it. Another time I might do 18 days and calculate that into the duration of the project and the impact on cost and everything um, based on the information that I'm feeding it here. So that's kind of a quick overview of the risk register. And now I'm going to go into the response actions. So we had defined responses in each one of the individual activities or individual risks. And now we're just showing a list of all of those responses. So I have some that are in progress, I have some that are not started, and I've got some that are proposed still, right? So this gives me an overview of all of the actions that are being taken to address the risk that exist. This also has the ability to change the view. I can set up different views for this to show different types of information. Maybe I show it by actual risk. This is showing it by the progress of the risk, right? What's the status of the risk in progress, not started? But I can rearrange this view to show different information depending on how I want to present it, maybe in a meeting, or do my analysis on it. Again, I'm seeing some of these that are late, so I can really track the progress of these right here from this window. Each one of those also will show the impacted risks, impacted activities to the risk. So those are the risks, so the activities associated with each one of these risks. Okay, anything else here? Yep, I did that, identify the late actions. So let's go on into the risk analysis. So everything we've done up to this point has been to gather the information, identify the risks, put in our assessment of them, and then we can analyze the impact of those risks to the project. There is a run risk analysis button that will take all of that information we fed into it and run the simulations on it. I'll open up the advanced column here. So the idea here is we've gone through and identified risks. We have tied those to activities. We've set up the minimum, most likely, and basically pessimistic and optimistic views of the durations of those activities. We've assigned costs to those activities and probability of it happening. And so all of that information is fed into this Monte Carlo simulation and allows us to do up to 5,000 iterations of that, in which it goes through and it says, I'm picking these specific risks to focus on, and I'm picking these attributes of it. So it may be based on the probability of it happening. It may be based on the impact that it has, but it's taking that information together and creating a different run of your project schedule to produce the information that we'll see here. I'm not going to go into the details here on how to set this up, but the idea here is by using convergence, I can stop the number of iterations that are running based on how the minimum amount of change that happens between those iterations. So every 100 iterations, I check to see how much the previous results are from the current results. And if it gets down to the convergence threshold, then it'll stop running. It saves time. Everything's going to run down to the same point from that point on. And so it doesn't make sense to continue that. So that's the level of detail that's here, the level of power and effort that's put into this. to come up with the analysis that we're seeing here. Okay. Let's start with the distribution results. So this is based on the finish date for the project. And so it's saying that during the run of the iterations, I think we ran this one for 1,000 iterations. This finish date, December of 2025, there were 4 iterations that came back in December. If we see over here, this is March, the project end date pushed to March 93 times out of the 1,000 iterations that it ran. Okay, so that's what this is telling us here. We also see the deterministic value. This was the finish date for the activities for the project based on the schedule. I can also show the optimistic. So this is the optimistic finish date for the project. This is the pessimistic finish date for the project. And this is the probability 50, the P50 for the project, most likely to happen to finish around April. Okay, so that's how you look at that. Other information that's displayed here, you can see the specific dates, 2/5 is optimistic. But what also it did here is calculate a pessimistic contingency. So this is saying you really ought to keep about 153 days in mind for contingency on this, on a project that's about a year long. That's a lot of contingency. So obviously, the numbers here are beyond what you would expect to see in a normal situation. But to show you that that variance, that's probably a good way of doing that. Let's look at some of the other pieces that are available here. I can look at, this is the project level. I can actually drill down to specific activities. And if I go to the pre-construction activity, what was it, B1090, site preparation, and select that. This is the spread of the finish date for that specific activity from the simulations that were run. It's kind of interesting. Take it down to that level. We'll take it back up to the project level. We'll look at some of the other things here. Here's the remaining cost. So you can see the cost spread on this, same idea, the number of iterations that showed up within this cost range per the 1,000 iterations that we ran, with the pessimistic, optimistic, and most likely values as well. So that's the remaining cost. At completion cost, it's here as well. The duration of the project, number of days. The start date just has the start date for the project. There's not a lot of information there. But if we go to the schedule and cost, this scatter chart shows you the probability of the project being on time and in budget. So 0% on our, based on our risks, we're not going to make it. There's a 1% chance that we are on time but over budget, and then the other 99% tell us we're going to be over budget and late. That's how that is read. And then these values here, I'm going to go back to the remaining cost here, also can be displayed. This is the pre-response. I can display that as post-response too. So here is the likelihood of that finishing at this cost is a lot higher here post than it was pre, right? So that's showing me the difference there. And I can also show these side by side. So you can see the change here. The purple showing the pre-response, the probability of this happening within this price range was very slim after the responses were taken into account, obviously the probability of that happening within that price range is much higher. If I look at the mean impact, so mean impact takes a look at, in this case, the activity delay distribution. So these are the specific activities that are most impacted by the risks. So it's showing that. So those obviously would be the activities that I want to concentrate on. If I address those activities, I may be able to reduce the risk. I can look at that from an activity perspective. I can also look at from a risk perspective. So these are the risks. These are the impacts of those risks on the project. And so I want to look at those risks that have the bigger impact on the project, obviously reduce those risks. That would allow me to reduce the overall impact of the project. Again, pre-response versus post-response. You can see it drops from 29 days to 11 days on that response. And there's also a risk removal impact. If I were to remove the environmental impact risk altogether, that's going to give me 23 days back on the project, right? So again, gives me an opportunity to look at the impact to the project of each risk and address that accordingly. Let's move on to the risk iteration analysis. So what this is showing me, I'm going to pick a specific project here, or a specific activity, this site activity. This takes the first 50 iterations of the 1,000 that we did and walks you through what the schedule looks like based on the risk impact. So for this, let's see, it was the site preparation. So site preparation for the first iteration, it added 6 days to this activity. So based on that iteration run, the items that were selected, this project or this activity was increased by 6 days as part of that. And it takes a look down here for the risk impact. It shows the risks that caused that 6-day delay, right? Associated with that. So this walks through each one of those first 50 iterations and will show which activities are impacted and how the choices that the Monte Carlo simulation took impact the project schedule. Okay, and I can do that both pre-response and post-response, and I can change that view if I wanted to display this in a different manner. So very robust capabilities here to do that and walk through all of that information. One other thing I want to show here is the risk analysis at the program level. So I'm going to go out to the program. I'm going to select the program being a group of projects. So if I look at the sustainability program for the City Edge company, I can display here, this is the project, or this is the program, and then I can see each of the projects associated with that program. Here's the soccer complex project, the remodel. These are all of the activities that we were just looking at in the soccer complex. In addition, I can define program level risks, right? So those program level risks are here, and I can define the type, the cause, description, define them, and also the impact to those. So this is risk identification at the program level. I can also do the qualitative and quantitative. So again, these are the risks at the program level, and then each of the risks we're tracking underneath that for specific projects. An interesting aspect of this is that in addition to the project level matrices, programs can have their own matrices levels. So I go back to the risk identification. So I don't have that here. Let me pick a risk soccer complex here. So this probability and impact can be defined at the project level to give me that impact based on the project level matrices. And I can also show it at the program level. So a risk identified at the project level might have, probably will have, less of an impact. The actual range for the schedule impact or cost impact based on the program, the definition of a high impact for a program is going to be a bigger range than it is at the project level. You can see how that would be helpful to reassess these risks based on the impact to the overall portfolio as opposed to the individual project. So as we're looking at the risk registry at the program level, allows us to track that overall program level risks down to the level of the activity, to the level of the individual projects, and kind of get a better feel from an organizational perspective what the impact of the risks are overall. Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today for the risk information. If I go back to the project level for soccer complex. Just a quick recap here. We looked at the dashboard list, showed you the level of detail that we can get at the dashboard level to show the impact of risks to the project. We also went into the risk register where we defined the risks and identified the probability impact both pre and post response. And then we went into the response actions, looked at each of the actions being taken to mitigate these risks, and then into the risk analysis to show you all of the different analysis that we can do based on the information that we fed into it. And then we talked a bit about the Monte Carlo simulations and the impact to the schedule based on each one of those iterations in the simulation. So very powerful aspect to OPC, certainly is useful in tracking your risks as well as seeing that impact, addressing that impact across the project and also across the program. Okay, so let me go back to the slide presentation for a second. So next month, the plan is to have the task management portion of OPC, and that will be on Wednesday, March 12th. In closing, I hope this gave you the opportunity to see OPC and the risk management module for that. It is very robust. It does offer you a lot of analysis and can be very helpful in mitigating the risks on your project. Hopefully bring that in on time and within budget.